Well, hey, Carter, thanks for joining us and talking to the community about the topic of partnerships. So before we jump into each of the stages, can you introduce yourself, kind of some of your background, but also frame up what are we talking about? What does partnership mean?
Absolutely. Thanks again, David. I'm really looking forward to our opportunity today to talk a little bit more. But to get started, I am a partner guy. I work in something called the channel. I've been doing the channel the last 6 of my 8 years. I'm doing a lot of the work in the B2B space. I spent some time working at AWS, predominantly working with partners that were coming and building technologies in the cloud. As you probably heard that buzzword, Apple Cloud, I'm a part of that. Then I also ended up moving over to working at Oracle and helping support companies called system integrators. And those essentially are individuals that have a unique experience and knowledge around building our products. So I've worked through a couple different channels and partnerships, as we call them, in a couple different facets. But, today we're going to kind of roll it back a little bit and talk about partnerships 101 here, where I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. And really it is where two companies, it could be more than two companies, it could be multiple companies, come together on a joint value with a joint or agreed upon objective. So again, it's an exciting opportunity where, again, it is a force multiplier. It will allow you to really capitalize on, not just growing individually, but growing with somebody that can help complement you in such a way to really help you achieve scale. And with a partnership, you can do that.
Well, that sounds exciting. Let's go ahead and jump in.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, our last stage is the event stage. And so it can happen kind of anywhere along the way. And an event is when something major, either internal to the business, like that could be an IPO, a merger acquisition, succession planning, things like that, or something external out in the market. So that could be a regulatory change, an overall market shift. It could be something like the pandemic where we all have to stay indoors. Everything seems to change. So that you have this either internal or external event that kind of changes the game. So how do you think about partnerships? What are some guidelines for a business owner, a leader, to think about partnerships in these different events that are disruptive?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what are those events that happen? It's the IPOs. It's, it could be a market demographic shift. There is a lot that happens. And that's, again, I wouldn't say going back to the drawing board, but it is allowing you to open the door to actually materializing a partnership in such a sense that becomes a business that you're going to end up acquiring, or they're going to acquire you. It's about how, instead of it now being external, it's about how it could become internal, because at some point we were partnered together and now I could be acquiring you. Now that external facing relationship is becoming more internal. So it's evaluating how that would play out and how that would shift the dynamics in a good way, of course. But also I think from the channel standpoint too is, how do we continue to refine our long-term strategy here as an organization with these things that are starting to evolve more. So definitely feel like at that point you've already proven it out. You've already built, you've already scaled, but what you've really done here is you've shown that you're the best of the best, and there's somebody willing to pay for what you bring to the table. And so you need to just evaluate and explore, how do we continue to operate as that business, or is that business evolving as well? Because that acquisition goes a long way.
Yeah. Well, and something as you're describing that came to mind that, we don't always touch on when we're doing these interviews and other topics, but that event, it's not just internal events to you, but internal events to your partners. Sure. Like if your partner gets acquired, well, the company acquiring them might not want to partner with you anymore. Mm-hmm. Or you might go, ooh, I don't really like y'all's message and our message. We are not positioned the same. This partnership doesn't make any sense. Or, so like that's something I imagine that's also kind of, you're not just navigating your own internal events, but even the internal events at your partners have direct impact on you. And so I imagine there's some of that you're trying to navigate. Any insight you want to give?
Yeah, again, it's at that point though, you've definitely scaled your business. It's just, you want to make sure that you have revenue generating partnerships across the board. Again, you just need to maybe calibrate on what some of those expectations are. Again, it's tough. It's really tough when you have one of your best revenue drivers, unfortunately, maybe being pivoted to their own acquisition. You need to evaluate and maybe pivot to, okay, cool, who's the next best partner that we need to have and double down on that, or who's the gap that will fill that for us. So it really is, how do you scale that partnership in such a sense to a new area that you might have not been thinking about because of some of the business that's changed and you guys have gone through. So it happens though, and they'll give you'll get tidbits of information and understand that they could be an acquisition target. They could be going, worst case, they could be going bankrupt. You will get ideas around it, which you will need to be able to calibrate and pivot when that event does end up happening.
Yeah, that makes sense. And because even these events, they can happen early too, and so that can be a danger even when you start a relationship. Maybe you're earlier in that journey, probably to some degree trying to suss out some of these things of like, hey, how stable are they? How mature is this business? How, like, I'm going to start a partnership, I want someone who's going to be around for a long time. So even there's probably kind of like what you're describing, you're attempting to forecast maybe some potential events, not both when that partnership's forming, but also over time. I imagine too, there's also when the change is external, whether it's market shift, or regulatory shift, some global event. There's probably a sense of, like I think you said this, like going back to the drawing boards and going, oh, well, in this new world, who do we want to partner with? Like, I imagine a lot of people decided to partner with Zoom in 2020, because all of that stuff is online, and it's like, oh, who do we need to partner with now to figure this out? Like, any guidance, or also cautions, like for pitfalls, because when everything kind of goes back on the drawing board, it can be really hard to make sense of it. Anything you want to speak to in that aspect?
Yeah, no, the global pandemic was a great example of that. And I'll touch on it just really quickly here. You saw things shut down left and right. Movies that were going to be released in theaters were no longer going to be released in theaters, and they had to pivot over to going to Max and using some of those other subscriptions. So you had to, on the fly, figure out, I don't know what the future holds at this stage of the game, but I have an avenue that I might be able to leverage and take advantage of. And again, that's something more in-house, but you had to stop. Some of those had to stop their partnerships. They had to reevaluate some things. So going back to the drawing board, though, it's just some things you need to consider is, is this going to be fruitful for my business through perpetuity? Is this going to be something that will continue to show dominance in the future? Is this going to be where we're going to be in the best position, that we're going to be the best at what we do together? And if you don't know, then it's important to obviously reevaluate like most businesses would. But I think it's also critically important for you to make sure that we understand how the partnership's going to continue to evolve as our business continues to evolve together. So I think it's just the evolution of how your business is growing. And I talked about it earlier, but I think it kind of goes back to that point of, it's just understanding the dynamics of what's going on with our business and their business, and just being aware of how things happen. It could be a technology comes out. It could be a global pandemic. It could be, a new innovative approach to things. It's a lot. It's a lot that could happen. So just being mindful of the unknown, I think, is going to be helpful, and just not necessarily preparing for it, being able to mitigate when it happens.
And again, that's where, we saw that at a interpersonal level, is the more connected you were in the pandemic, typically the better you did. If you have friends, if you have a community, if you're connected to your local community as an individual, as a household, you tended to thrive more in all that change, because you had others that you could come alongside and help one another. Imagine in a similar way, that's kind of what we're talking about with business. It's like, okay, now there is some risk, because like you mentioned, a lot of supply chains shut down, a lot of things shut down. But if you're well connected and well partnered, if you've been developing those relationships, it also helps give some resiliency and some options where maybe you decided not to partner with someone before, it didn't make sense. everything changes and you're like, hey, we already are friends. And now it kind of makes sense. So I imagine that's when you're saying prepare for it. Maybe that's an aspect of it, of just really staying well connected with people who could potentially one day be partners, but maybe it doesn't make sense right now, but they're still adjacent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, keeping that relationship, I think, is going to be key long term. And another one is co-opetition models, where
Okay, talk about that.
your competitor is a partner. Now, that's a unique opportunity. Like, wait a minute, why am I working with somebody that does exactly what I do? And we're known as maybe some of the top dogs in that respective space. You need to figure out what true value is when that happens, because if it benefits both companies and the value far out, exceeds what that is actually worth, it can really open a lot more doors for you. And I think that's a model that I'm experiencing right now in my own company. And it's exciting to kind of see, because it's something that companies were going head to head at for such a long time. And the fact that you might be able to work with your top competitor is very unique, but just because of the market opportunity is so large that working together makes sense. So it's something to take into consideration as well. And if you can do that right, then you're the best partner around. There's nothing better than what you might have on the market, because of the fact that you are working with your direct competitor.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. That is when you said that, I was like, oh, that's not something I would have expected. So, all right, well, as we've kind of walked through all these different stages, Carter, is there anything you want to kind of way you want to frame up just partnerships in general, some takeaways for our founders, our leaders that are watching this?
Yeah. Spend some time with your team. Really get to know the ideal partner profile. I even have this note right in front of me that even talks about it. It's just like, going back to knowing your business goals, find the right business model, whether it be distribution, whether it be an OEM partnership, maybe it be, franchise, or maybe it's just a co-branded marketing partnership here. So really making sure that you craft that narrative, and that narrative evolves with you as your company evolves. Make sure that you're taking into consideration cultural as well. If the company you're working with doesn't share cultural things that are important for you as an organization, then you could run the risk of having something that really doesn't pan out to being a successful partnership. So I think it's always going back to having those key components locked in. And then finally, understanding the motion of sell to, sell with, and sell through. I didn't touch on that too much, but I want to touch on it now. Is you can sell directly to someone with your own resources. You can sell with somebody. And again, that's where you're using their resources to help you sell their product potentially. And you can sell through them. And that's like a marketplace. You can use that pretty easily to think about like Amazon.com and going and using that as a procurement channel to purchase and buy products and have them be sold there. So if you can get that down to a T and understand, again, that value prop, we talked about that Better Together story, and spend time on it, because it's not easy. It's going to be one of the most challenging things for you to build that out. But if you can get that down to the T, then it's easy to go sell it, because if you can convince somebody else to sell your own product, then you're doing something right.
Yeah, I like that. That's really helpful. I think actually, yeah, this has been really helpful, Carter, as you've walked through. I'm sure people may have some other questions, which they can always come, and glad you're part of the community at Fiesta Connect, and so they can come in here and ping you, maybe ask some questions, grab some time. But yeah, thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us, and yeah, kind of walking through what does partnerships look like at each stage of business.
Thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it.